It's going live here in just a moment.
All right, it says streaming. We're live. Hello, I am Jax James, the Executive Director for Texas NORML. I also serve as the State Policy Manager for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, just so you know what NORML stands for. We're all normal here. I wanted to kick it off real quick with you guys tonight. We have a really great lineup. I wanted to give you the overview and then get started. First, we're going to be joined by Morgan Fox, who is the political director for NORML. He works in DC on all of our federal actions. He's coordinating with all of our federal representatives and is working on Smoke the Vote with me. It's been really great to get to know Morgan more. We had met each other previously, and now we have a good working relationship. And then we're going to talk with David Bass, who, if you recall, he has served on Texas NORML board for a decade and is continuing to do his veteran outreach and veteran work that he does. And we're going to talk a little bit also about some of the local initiatives. One of them is happening in Killeen, which is Dave's local city. And we're going to close it out by talking about a really fun event that we have coming up at Willie Nelson's golf course. It's our annual veteran golf tournament. It's our Puff and Putt, if you will, and that's how we'll close out the evening. So I'm going to quickly turn it to Morgan Fox. He is on the East Coast, joining us at a late hour in his man den. If you guys will help me welcome Morgan, will you tell us a little bit about what bills are moving, what legislation is filed, what has been happening recently? I know you are working very closely with people up in DC.
Absolutely, and thanks again for having me, Jax. So the last month has been honestly pretty slow because Congress has been in recess, and with the midterms coming up, there hasn't really been a whole lot that politicians are doing other than politicking, unfortunately. But just to give everybody sort of an update of where we stand now that Congress is getting back into session for the next month before everybody takes off on the campaign trail again. So there's a very limited number of legislative days, but some of the things that we can definitely look forward to, hopefully before the midterms, are first and foremost the Medical Marijuana Research Act, which was approved unanimously in the Senate. And then the House shortly thereafter passed a similar bill that, in our opinion, was much more expansive and far superior to the Senate version because it actually allowed scientists to be able to access products for study that are legally available in state licensed dispensaries, products that people are actually using. Unfortunately, during the negotiations between the two chambers, that portion got stripped out of the compromise bill that the House sent back to the Senate. There were some improvements made on the Senate version, and now basically we're just waiting for the Senate to rubber stamp this and send it to the president for signing. While this might not seem like a very big deal, and in terms of actual effect, it's a step in the right direction. It will help facilitate some research in cannabis, as well as help to speed the timeline for approval of producers outside of the University of Mississippi that are actually allowed to create and produce cannabis for research purposes. There are some shortcomings there, but what's most important is that this would be the first standalone cannabis policy reform bill to have ever been passed by Congress since the passage of the CSA. So symbolically, this would be a very big deal, and I think will help make a lot more lawmakers more comfortable with voting for more expansive measures in the future. So, there's no guarantee that that will get approved by the Senate and sent to the Biden administration before the midterms, but it seems pretty likely. We actually expected them to do it before the recess, but I think time just ran out, and they had a lot of other things that they were juggling at that moment. So hopefully we'll be able to see that get passed and get signed by the president within the next couple of weeks. The next thing that we really need to be thinking about is the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes a number of cannabis policy reform provisions, including the Safe Banking Act language, the Veterans Equal Access Act language, which provides protections for cannabis users that are in the VA system, as well as allows VA doctors to be able to recommend cannabis under medical programs that are legal in the states in which they operate without fear of reprisal, which would be huge for the veteran community. It also includes provisions that would prevent discrimination by federal employers for veterans that are currently or have in the past used cannabis, and would provide guidance to the VA not to discriminate against people that are working in the state legal cannabis industries who are trying to get VA home loans. There are a number of other research provisions attached to that as well. So the House passed these by a pretty wide margin. And now we're just waiting for the Senate to introduce its version of the NDAA, which Armed Services Committee has said will probably happen around mid-September. So we're just waiting for that language. And in the meantime, if you go to NORML's website, norml.org/act, there's a button right at the top there to contact your senators, asking them to include those provisions in the NDAA. So please make sure to go and do that and spread those links around far and wide. But we're going to be working with that committee as well as the entire Senate to make sure that those provisions are included in the final NDAA. Next up, we've got appropriations, which, unfortunately, I think is at a little bit of a standstill right now. It's looking very much like the new appropriations language that has been moving around Congress over the last several months is not going to pass before the midterms. And because the funding runs out on September 30th, we're looking at what's called a continuing resolution, which just means that the same budget that we were operating last year is going to be continued for a finite period of time, probably through the beginning of January. Because if they don't do that, there will be a government shutdown, and nobody wants that right before a midterm election. Unfortunately, that means that we're not going to make much progress when it comes to appropriations right now. But we are looking forward to when the new appropriations packages are going to be put forth, which so far have gotten several effective cannabis policy reform measures added to them as amendments. So in the base language, we're going to continue the protections for medical programs, but an amendment to extend those protections to adult use programs and tribal territories has been approved by Rules Committee and by the House. So, as well as veterans language and several other pieces of cannabis policy reform that we're really excited about will hopefully be included when Congress decides to start looking at a new budget after the continuing resolution and after the midterms. And I guess last but not least, I think everybody is kind of wondering what's going to be happening with more substantive stuff. And I know that, we're waiting with bated breath to see the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act be introduced. It was introduced and it looks pretty solid. There are some problems that NORML finds with it, particularly as regarding taxation, which is entirely too high to be able to sustain an adequate market. But the fact is that the votes aren't there to pass this. It won't be brought up for a vote this year. But what it is doing is facilitating conversations where they hadn't been taking place before about all sorts of different avenues for cannabis policy reform. And there is a growing consensus and accelerating negotiations to pass a package of limited incremental reforms before the end of the year that would be greatly beneficial. And right now, those negotiations are including things like safe banking with increased protections against discrimination, things like access to Small Business Administration loans and grants programs for small and women and minority-owned businesses in the cannabis space, things like veterans protection and access to medical cannabis. Things like Second Amendment protections for medical cannabis patients, and as well as expungement and facilitating expungement efforts at the state level with federal funding. How much of that will actually stick is anybody's guess, but the fact that we're throwing so many things at the wall right now and that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of kickback from either side of the aisle is really heartening to me, and makes me think that we have a lot of possibilities for making real substantive reforms short of descheduling and comprehensive reform in the current session during the lame duck. So, we're going to continue working in DC, and we're definitely going to be continuing leaning on the state chapters to reach out to their lawmakers and to activate their bases to try to push these measures forward. And we'll keep everybody posted on what the progress is as the weeks go by.
Well, I love it when you lean in, because in Texas, I'm like, yes, help. At the federal level, help. So there are a couple questions, and I feel like sometimes I know I'll start talking about cannabis law in Texas, and I'll start using alphabet soup, and people are like, "What you talking about?" So I actually have a question about: can you explain what is the CSA? Can you explain, like, to people, what does that mean federally, and how does that trickle down to the states?
The Controlled Substances Act?
Yeah.
So that was passed in 1972, and it basically set up the system of modern prohibition as we know it, putting cannabis as a Schedule I narcotic, which is defined as having a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use, which we all know is complete garbage, and which 37 states and counting, as well as several territories, have already proven is garbage. And unfortunately, while that is in place, despite the fact that states have been allowed to pursue legal medical and adult use programs, if the federal government were to decide that it wanted to start cracking down on these, it could. That has not been the state of play for almost a decade now. And even in 2018, when then Attorney General Jeff Sessions decided to rescind the Cole memo, which basically was a non-binding instruction for federal prosecutors not to waste money and resources going after state legal operators and patients, even when that memo was rescinded by Jeff Sessions, federal prosecutors, especially in states that had already been experiencing legal and regulated cannabis markets, didn't start cracking down because they knew that it was a total waste of resources for them to do so. And that has been pretty much the MO of the Department of Justice for a number of years now. That being said, a change of administration, a change in the political winds could take all of that away in an instant. And without having a change in the Controlled Substances Act and removing cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances, we're not really going to be safe at the state level in these programs. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the appropriations bills that have been passing since 2014 have included protections for medical states, which basically means that in whatever the fiscal year's budget is, the Department of Justice cannot spend resources to interfere with state legal medical cannabis programs. And we're hoping in the next appropriations round to be able to extend those protections to adult use programs as well. This is only a temporary measure, but it definitely sends a signal to the rest of Congress as well as the country at large that it is time to stop messing with the states and start facilitating a federal framework to help the states be better at instituting these programs and to remove barriers for states that have not yet crossed that Rubicon.
Well, I want to follow up on what you said with the fact that there are many states that have, like the word or not, trigger type laws or ramifications to their regulations if the CSA changes. Like an example is Texas. Whenever the hemp bill was passed and it changed and hemp was no longer on the CSA, it was up to Texas to say either we will go with what the USDA decides or we'll make our own program. And they were like, we'll make our own program, right? And so descheduling in this way really creates this impetus for the states to address this issue that they want to just leave fallow and not address, in my opinion. So yeah. I think it's really important that people understand what is the CSA, how does it impact literally your everyday life as a cannabis consumer?
Well, I think it's also important to point out that even if cannabis were removed from the CSA tomorrow, that wouldn't change anything at the state level. Cannabis would still be completely illegal in places like Idaho, Nebraska, and it does not force states to make cannabis legal. So it still is very much a state level effort. And what those programs look like on a state to state basis, I think, is going to be quite varied. But by removing cannabis from the CSA, it allows the federal government to start to impose guidelines and guardrails on and some sense of uniformity at a certain level. States will still have a lot of leeway to be able to do what they want, but there will be certain, guardrails set up to allow them to be able to more effectively coordinate between each other, and to make sure that there are some sort of uniform health and safety standards. Not to mention the fact that a large amount of the problems that are caused by the fact that cannabis is still a Schedule I substance are means that it creates barriers to research. So, while we know that from the amount of research available that cannabis is a relatively safe substance, there are still huge, tremendous barriers to research that prevent us from being able to study currently available products, to be able to do human trials as opposed to large epidemiological surveys and things like that. So, I mean, there are so many things that would be improved by a change at the federal level, but I think that we're still a little bit away from that. At least a few years now. And in the meantime, states are going to continue to forge ahead and be the leaders in this space.
Well, I think that gives a really good opportunity for us to say, NORML's position is really that descheduling from the CSA federally is the appropriate act to take, rather than rescheduling, which limits it solely to medical access. And I think that that's important, that the people watching this understand what rescheduling versus descheduling on the CSA, the Controlled Substance Act, what does that mean, right? And so if we are descheduling, that means we just remove it. And so people have to now create their own ways of dealing with it in their states. Whereas if we reschedule it, we put it into a very tight, regulated medical structure, which, not to say that it shouldn't also be there, but we know that it is genuinely a safe enough plant that people can use it independently without necessarily always needing to have a doctor's recommendation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And rescheduling actually wouldn't do anything to eliminate the state and federal conflict, really. Every single medical and adult use program in the United States right now is in direct violation of federal law. But if we reschedule cannabis as opposed to descheduling it, all these programs would still be in violation of federal law. And in order for them to get square with federal law, every single dispensary in the country would have to get a pharmacy license. And that would throw every single state program into total disarray.
I think there's one state program that runs on a pharmacy type structure. So I will leave that there. That is one thing I have learned as state policy manager. Okay, so last question for you, Morgan, before we let you say goodnight, because it's oh so late where you are. Everyone wants to know, tell us more about Biden. What's up?
Honestly, we've been hearing a lot of people talk about after the student loan forgiveness that and the generally positive response that he got from his base, whether or not it would be worth it for the administration to double down on and start following through with some of the cannabis promises that he made. And our answer is absolutely yes. Do it tomorrow. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. Everybody on his team that has been asked publicly about it has demurred or given non-answers. And, at the end of the day, while the president is a very smart politician and I think recognizes the benefit to his party if he actually starts taking action, particularly before the midterms on some of these things that are wildly popular across party lines, not just among Democrats. The fact is that, he's still an old school drug warrior. He has been slowly changing his mind, and he's surrounded by people who know the score and they know that cannabis prohibition's days are numbered and they want to accelerate that process. But expecting it to be a priority issue for the Biden administration, I think is not realistic. And we're trying to create conditions where we're forcing him into a corner. And unfortunately, international politics has done that to a certain extent with the horrendous imprisonment of Brittany Griner and several other people on cannabis charges in the Russian Federation.
Well,
But
the discussion about how we have been the champions of the drug war here in America, and yet now it's legal here, and we're still holding other countries up to different standards. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about that at the federal level, for sure.
yeah, I mean, we've been exporting the drug war both in terms of policy and bullets for decades.
Yes.
Or
Paraquat in the case of Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, this is something that, I've been saying since the beginning of the Biden administration, that, while it might not be an issue that we can expect him to cheerlead on or be a leader on, I don't see a world in which he would veto a even incremental or comprehensive set of legislation that lands on his desk vis-a-vis legalization or even just positive incremental reform. I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. Now, should we continue to hammer him on following through the campaign promises, particularly when it comes to things like pardons and expungements? Absolutely. And there is not a day that goes by that we should not be bringing that up because, these were promises that were made, and it's something that the administration could do with the stroke of a pen.
Well, let me just tell you that here in Texas, we don't know what quit means, because if we did, we would have gotten them a long time ago. So we are right there with you, like continuing to push that here in Texas. And I want to let everybody know that Stephen has dropped the link to norml.org/act so that you can participate in these national level action alerts. Press Biden to have these conversations. They are not going to go away. This has continued to be popular, and by not having this conversation and addressing it directly feels disingenuous. And if he continues to hear this, it's important. But then you've also got these great bills that Morgan's talking about, one of which has the actual potential to pass. The first one since the CSA passed in what year, Morgan?
72.
So long ago. Gross. So there is so much that we can do in this interim to get it done. But I also wanted to mention, Morgan, you've been sending out surveys to federal level candidates. I've been sending out surveys to state level candidates. We've got Smoke the Vote going on. Texas NORML is going to have our independent voters guide put out in just a few weeks. So, I mean, these are things that people need to make sure that they are registered to vote. We are coming up against those deadlines. They need to make sure that they are informed on who they are voting for and where they stand on the cannabis policy issues in the state or federal level where they live.
You're absolutely right. And just as one parting point, cannabis policy reform is not going to be a top-down thing. It's going to have to come from the people. And that means that we should not expect any president of any party to be the stalwart leader on this. It's going to come from Congress. It's going to come from state legislatures. It's going to come from local city councilors. So get active local, and you can help build a groundswell of action that will reverberate all the way up to Capitol Hill.
So have you been doing interviews for a while and you know how to set up segues for me to introduce David Bass to talk about local things that are happening? Because you just did a great job. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but you nailed it. Thank you very much. Morgan Fox, thank you so much for joining us, talking about federal updates. Let's segue now to David Bass. Many of you probably remember him serving on the Texas NORML board as our veterans director for a decade. We have some exciting events coming up, but also Dave is continuing to work boots on the ground with veterans, figuring out what's going on. But in addition to that, there are also some local initiatives, one of which is going on in Killeen. So I want to talk about all these things with you, Dave. Which one should we start on? Now you're muted, so tell the people, what should we start with, David?
Well, becoming a legal medical cannabis patient on September 1st changed my life in a profound way, which is for 10 years previously, I was a criminal in Texas, committing serious crimes, including felonies related to marijuana law. And magically, on September 1st, I continued to do the exact same thing, but I was legal. Isn't it
I like how you say
interesting?
magically, like it just, it
Yeah.
happened. It's not like
Yeah.
you worked on it for a decade, Dave. It
Yeah.
just happened.
It was, but I mean, it just goes to show the power of the government. You know, for 10 years, the government said, Dave, you're a criminal because of using cannabis. And then on September 1st, the state of Texas said, congratulations, Dave, you're no longer a criminal. You're perfectly legal. Continue to use cannabis every day, anywhere
But
you
just
want,
now buy
all the
these
time.
products.
Yeah. And I'm still the same person, you know, using cannabis. And so it's astounding what we have to go through with both the United States government at the federal level and Texas at the state level. But now that I'm legal, I had to keep a low profile here in my Fort Hood community all these years. But now that I'm legal, I'm able to really focus on what the NORML representative said, which is the key to victory is local action. So I'm really pleased that I can get out and about, introduce myself to everybody in this community and talk about cannabis.
And so Colleen is like a huge veteran community that is, you know, a crux of where you have been working and connecting with people and building momentum. And when PTSD was added, you were able to join, you know, the ranks of medical cannabis patients in Texas, which is not a huge rank and file even now, right? So
Yeah.
I would like to hear from you a little bit about, you know, Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. What is the 2023 focus? Before we get back to the local, I know you and I have talked about a few things in particular. What are some of the things that you really want to make headway on this year?
Well, as always, we have to be political realists, as you and others have taught us over the years. We don't like it. We hate it. We don't like to hear you tell us to be realistic about what we can accomplish in Texas.
I don't want to say it. Shoot for the stars.
That's right. But having spent 5 sessions up there at the Capitol with Jax and our other activists, we've learned the hard way. You work very hard and you try to calibrate what's possible. And so I believe that's what's possible in 2023 is we want Representative Stephanie Click to write a bill that relates to the compassionate use program and have 2 very important things in it. Number 1, let's do away with the THC 1% by weight rule and let doctors decide our dosage, just like with all of our other medications. And number 2, let's do away with this ever-growing list of qualifying conditions and let our doctors decide what medical conditions could be helped by cannabis. Those are our 2 objectives that we think is possible. And the least objective is to add chronic pain to the compassionate use program.
And I would also say TBI, very important. It's not explicit, it's implicit in the program right now, but I think that it, especially for veterans, TBI is extremely important to talk about. Anything having to do with something that you might be prescribed an opioid for, I think is absolutely integral. And I want to say right here, right now, I don't want to hear anybody talking bad about Stephanie Click. We need to be working with her on reducing, or I'm sorry, on improving the THC percentage that we have in the program. I think it's a real opportunity that we have to let doctors decide. And if we can be thoughtful and helpful with the office with her, I think that we can really do a lot. So just anybody who's listening today, I know that, you know, sometimes we have complicated feelings about the program that we have. And that's unfortunately because we have a really complicated political system here. And so we need to make allies where we can. And Stephanie Click has carried every bill that has ever passed in Texas. And we need to be thoughtful and work on that. And I have been hearing from a lot of activists in her district that she is having meetings and having these conversations. And that is important. So whoever's watching, I want to really focus on us being positive leading into this next legislative session, knowing that we're going to start with things that we want. And then the lieutenant governor is going to be like,
Yeah.
so November,
right.
let's get back to November.
Yeah.
Right. But I think, Dave, actually, you saw the lieutenant governor really recently, right? Did he happen to touch on any medical cannabis in that event that he hosted?
No, I'm a retired teacher, and he spoke to one of our retired teachers associations up in Temple, Bell County, retired school employees. And so, of course, I went hoping I could get a word with him again. But he just came in, he spoke, he focused on education issues, and then he hit the road. If you follow him on Facebook, he has this big, gigantic bus, and he's going all over the state in his campaign bus, meeting with people at the grassroots level. And so that tells me that he knows he's in a fight for re-election, because he barely won last election, just by a few percentage points. And so Collier, his opponent, has already received endorsement from 2 prominent Republicans in the state of Texas, because Lieutenant Governor Patrick is not all that popular among certain segments of his own party. And so Dan Patrick is out and about in the big bus. If you happen to see the bus, run over there, because Dan will want to take his pick with you, and that will give you an opportunity to talk about the 2023 lead session.
And always be thoughtful, even though in the moment you may not want to be. It's real hard sometimes, but we know.
Yes,
we know we have to make that connection, right?
As Jax has told us a million times, and Heather, be professional. Bottom line, be professional.
Yeah. Even if afterwards you're like, I don't feel so happy. I'm gonna smash this plate. So Dave, you are also in Killeen, which is one of the cities that we hope is going to follow suit with Austin, Texas, passing a local initiative. So for those who are watching, let me give a quick recap. In Texas, our marijuana laws are governed at the state level. So we have to go through the state legislature. There are some things that people can do at the local level, like deprioritization, first chance programs, but also there is a select number of cities called home rule cities. And these cities can pass initiatives that conflict with state law unless otherwise prohibited. And guess what? Marijuana is on the ballot. And in Austin, it passed by 86%, and Killeen, Harker Heights, which is nearby Killeen, San Marcos, Elgin, and Denton will all be on the ballot in November. And I'd like to hear from you, Dave, a little bit about how has that been going in Killeen? What has the conversations been like? I know you've been hosting, maybe not you particular, but Ground Game Texas and legislators have been hosting these meetings to have conversations about what will this mean for Killeen?
Well, it's very interesting because I paid close attention to how it went down in Austin, and it passed smoothly, 80-something% of the vote. The city council totally for it. And so no issues in Austin, of course. Totally different picture down here in the Fort Hood community. We have strong, organized opposition in both Harker Heights and Killeen. And so we will see how the vote turns out. But it is without a doubt not going to be easy to pass this ordinance. And so I was trying to think what I could do. And so I have Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, and Higher Education Texas is sponsoring, I was working on this flyer today, our public forum on Proposition A. And so I don't think our movement's ever done an event exactly like this. We're going to have a public forum on this decrim initiative, which is Proposition A in Harker Heights and Killeen. And we're going to invite the public. We're going to advertise in the paper. We're going to hand out flyers. And we're going to have a vote yes panel and a vote no panel with Q&A from the audience. And so we're going to get to hear both sides of the decriminalization issue. And each panel will have 3 members. And of the 6 members, 4 of them are veterans, which is very interesting. And 2 of the veterans are vote yes, and 2 of the veterans are definitely vote no. And so this is going to be really an exciting event with Lisa Sewell from TRMP and Amanda Grace Hughes from Higher Education Texas. And Amanda will be the MC, and they will be the moderators for the panels. And so this is going to be really exciting. And the members of our panels are leaders in our community. The Vote Yes panel is Killeen Mayor Pro Tem Ken Wilkerson, a veteran, Julie Oliver of Ground Game Texas, and Louis Miner, one of our original Texas veterans for medical marijuana, and is very active in our community here and running for county commissioner. The Vote No panel is former Killeen mayor and current council member Jose Segarra, who's very much opposed, and another veteran, Chris Bray, who's a retired major like me, and he's running for county commissioner, and he's strongly opposed. And they're going to also have a civil law attorney on their panel to explain why state law trumps home rule. And so Julie Oliver is a lawyer. And so she's going to answer the question about why municipalities have this right to vote on this question, on marijuana questions, even though we can at state level, we can at city level. And she will explain home rule. And then this other
That's
lawyer.
so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because this is like the root of like, keep it local governance. And then like, no. But when we don't like what you're doing, not local.
Yes. And so this civil law attorney will explain why state law trumps home rule. And that will be a very interesting discussion.
So it's going to be live streamed, right? Like we can tune in.
Yes, we're going to live stream it, and we're going to do a press release. The media will be there, and we think we'll have a really good turnout because this is getting lots of attention. I lost count of the number of articles in the Killeen Daily Herald and the number of news segments on the television stations. I mean, we have gotten tremendous media coverage off of this initiative, which is good for us state level activists.
Yeah, I mean, it's talking about bringing it down. And you know what I do want to say to anyone who is listening, who might be in Austin or one of these localities that will be voting on this, when it comes to these home rule ballot initiatives, it only governs your local police department. So if you are driving around in Austin, Texas, APD will not bother you. But guess what? Travis County sheriffs can, and DPS officers can. So I do want to just kind of give that disclaimer to anyone who's listening, that they understand that this is truly a very local initiative, doing the most that we can do with the discretion that these localities have.
And here's another issue. The city attorneys of Killeen and Harker Heights are advising their city councils that even if these initiatives pass with a majority of the vote, that the city councils should refuse to enact the ordinance based on the fact that it violates state law. And so it will be really interesting if these initiatives pass in Killeen and Harker Heights, but yet the city councils refuse, no matter what the people say, to enact the ordinances. And in that case, I anticipate, I don't know this, Julie hadn't told me this, I would anticipate Ground Game Texas might take them to court, and it could go all the way to the state Supreme Court.
I should hope so, because let's go back to our way, way back machine, Dave. You and I know a bunch of history about how we got to where we are. You know, there were local kind of free reign ballot initiatives before 1997. And in 1997, the San Marcos city was working to pass a medical marijuana program that looked like it was going to pass. Everything was going really well. Some kids decided to, or I say kids, some college students decided to consume cannabis on the courthouse steps. It didn't go well. And then public opinion turned and it didn't pass. And Austin was basically like, no, we don't like that. And they changed the law. So I am extremely interested to hear this conversation, because I think that the home rule is pretty clear, but the 1997 decision was also pretty clear with the statute. So where does it truly land? And Dave, like, please, can we not go to litigation? Can we just like change the marijuana laws already?
I really believe it's going to end up in litigation. That's my opinion. I think the initiative that definitely will pass in Killeen. Harker Heights a lot more conservative, so probably 50-50 over there. But I anticipate that one of these initiatives are going to end up in court, which will be fascinating for us at the state level.
It'll be fascinating, but also it better be a winning topic. Either way, let's talk and round out the night with something fun, because we've had a lot of serious conversation about some heavy things. Let's talk about the plant we all love, cannabis. So we have been doing a veterans benefit at Willie Nelson's golf course for, this will be the 8th time we've held it, but let's keep in mind we did have to postpone it for 2 years. So
yes, I was trying to remember. 8. 8's the number. That's cool.
8's the number, but technically we've been doing it for a decade. Just the pandemic screwed with some stuff, right? And we have another amazing lineup this year. You know, Dave has worked with us on this for every single time. This time, you know, Dave isn't on the board anymore, but we love veterans. And so there will be a veteran booth. We will be talking about veteran issues. We will be making sure to bring up all of the integral issues that need to be had. We've got some great sponsors, especially, you know, Dr. Matthew Brimberry. He has become a sponsor. I know that he worked with veterans on the veteran research project to talk about how does cannabis really affect veteran patients here in Texas. And this is going to be, okay, so we've got 2 rounds of golf, right, Dave? Like golf with a little ball and the thing, and you play golf. There's a morning one and an afternoon one.
The putt and puff and putt.
Yeah, the putt and puff and putt. I'm like, so we put on a golf benefit and I don't know how to play golf. But there's also a disc golf competition, which I also don't know how to play. So
everyone gets really excited when I tell them, and by the way, we have disc golf. And then they're like, okay, I'll be there.
And I would like to say that we have someone new organizing the disc golf this year. His name is Hadley, and he does a lot of competitions across the state. And he is really excited to be at Willie's. He knows that we've got kind of a limited space, so he's trying to make the best and the most fun course that he can for everybody there. Of course, y'all know we got vendors, already 24 vendors that have confirmed, a couple food vendors, shopping. We're going to have live glass blowing, all that kind of stuff is going to be going on. And in the interim, Dave, I know you love the music.
The music is my favorite.
Yes.
And I look forward to it every year, because doesn't Rebecca curate the band list from
oh my goodness, yes,
local musicians, and a lot of them are connected to the Nelson family one way or the other.
Yeah,
and
so Rebecca is Willie's granddaughter, right? And so she knows a lot of these people. She's worked with a lot of really great planners with us throughout the years, but this is the lineup that we have concocted for this year. Keepers of the Rock. They will be the opener. They're like a fun cover band. You're going to sing along to everything. You're having a really good time. And then we've got Spicewood Blues Connection with CJ Ninehoff, Choctaw Wildfire, Madam Radar, which you guys might remember as Texas KGB way back machine, but Madam
Yeah.
Radar is their new name. We're also going to have Mau Mau chaplains, and I'd like to take a moment to let the Mau Maus know that I am thinking about them. Miguel recently passed, and I know that he was an integral part of the band and who they are. And I want everyone, if we can here, to just kind of think about the Mau Maus. They have done so much through Mo and Angela and the Reggae Fest and Flamingo Cantina. And just, I would like everyone to please send them some really positive energy and some positive messages if you're close with them. But back to a little bit more positive, the headliner will be Rue Coleman and the Big Hurt. So we have a really great lineup. There will, of course, be awards being given out for the winners of the golf and disc golf championship games. And we will also be talking about veteran issues with Dave and others. And
we're
Dave?
giving the Texas NORML Veteran of the Year Award. We weren't able to do that during the pandemic. So I'm real excited. Not going to say who it is, but we're going to be able to finally give out the Texas NORML Veteran of the Year Award after this pandemic delay, and we're really excited about that.
I have faithfully dusted that award and maintained it in my closet for 2 years. And it is ready to be in its rightful home, David Bass.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, you know, I think I see one quick question. Let me pivot over here. A question about Mississippi. You know, Daryl, will you message me at jax@normal.org, because I don't know that answer offhand and I want to give you a real one about Mississippi. But otherwise, I would love to thank you, David, for joining us. It's always so good to see you. I've missed seeing your face on a regular basis through my computer screen. And also big thanks to Morgan for coming here and talking about our federal issues with us. And you haven't seen him, but he's been quietly in the background. Thank you to Stephen for making sure that we are switching between our presenters and everything smoothly. And I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today and watches in the future. What we are doing in Texas is extremely important. Sometimes it's frustrating, and that's okay. The good work, the good trouble almost always is. And when we get to justice at the end of the day, I'll be having tea on my front porch, and you're all welcome to join me. So on that note, I just want to tell everyone, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. It's been a lively and wonderful show. And thank you, Dave. I'll see you all next month.
Yes, see you at Puff and Putt. It's going to be an amazing, fun day.
Yes, it will. All right. Bye, everybody.